our brain is really good at pattern recognition, saying, ooh, we've been here before, no need to conserve energy thinking logically through this, here's how we respond, and sometimes we're responding in unhealthy ways. Okay, so first thing I have to do is in a classroom, I have to look and say, okay, am I bringing in to this classroom anxiety and tension and negative feelings? Am I bringing in any kind of angst into the classroom that my students may be responding to them and trying to build some new associations with learning, that we reward the behavior we want? And sometimes it's so easy as a parent. Rewards just take time. It takes time to be a good parent, and it's so much easier to be responsive and to operate from that intuitive brain as a parent even than it is to go into a thinking brain and say, what's really happening here? Why are they? Hey everybody, hope you're having a good Thursday. Teaching Tips Thursday. I look forward to this day a lot. Do you?
I do. It's one of my favorite days of the week.
She gets to glean from my wisdom and insights.
Something like that. Hey Jess, hey Desiree, jumping in on the app. Let us know you're there if you're watching on Facebook and the app.
Yeah, so today I want to be generous. I would like to give away 2,500 reward points to somebody who's commenting, and we're going to pick one comment in the Facebook app, and we're going to pick one in the Master Books app.
Awesome.
So be sure to comment, let us know you're here, let us know your thoughts, and Brittany will choose somebody today and let you know that we've deposited 2,500 reward points into your account. So, what power.
I know.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit today about associations and how to have a happy schoolroom. Sometimes it's easy to go through the motions of life and not consciously think about what we're doing, right? And so there are two parts to our brain. One is a deliberate brain, which that's our thinking brain. That's we're processing what's happening, we're thinking through it, and we're consciously moving forward with the deliberate mind. And then we have the intuitive mind, and that's more of the emotional mind. That's a reactive mind. It's not necessarily conscious of what's happening, it's just reacting. And experts say that we respond 50, maybe even a little bit more % of our life is lived out in the intuitive emotional mind, where we go through the motions of life without even thinking about it. We wake up, when the alarm goes off, we wake up, we take a shower, we're always thinking about something else, and we go through the motion. We brush our teeth. We don't have to think about how to brush our teeth. It's just something that our brain is responding to and has already been trained to do. Well, we have responses that we gain early on in life that we also respond to emotionally. And so first, let me put it in the context of an adult. Let's say that as a child, somebody reprimanded you. And in that moment, you felt shame and embarrassment, and you personalized it. Maybe they were belittling you, or maybe they were just trying to help you. But you personalized it, and you made it a negative thing. And you felt the shame, and so you became sensitive to correction. And so maybe that's the first time, and the brain has that response. You thought through it. You thought, man, I don't like the way they treated me. The next time it happens, maybe you don't think as much about it, but your brain already has a pattern or already has something to associate that behavior to. So it recognizes it and says, well, that was close to what I experienced in the past. I don't like that. And maybe then you even react. And so every time somebody corrects you, you become more sensitive to that because you feel the shame that you felt the first time. You've transposed that shame into the present situation. So then fast forward as an adult, that person becomes overly sensitive to any kind of correction because immediately they have the emotional response that's been started at this early point and then been conditioned and reinforced as time went on, to the point now that if somebody just says any kind of correction to them, they're overly sensitive and will respond emotionally to that. They don't always even know, why am I responding this way? We often hear somebody say he has daddy issues or mommy issues. A lot of that's what we're talking about. Some way that a parent treated you, then you have a response to. Now later on, as you're older and an adult, and it shouldn't operate the same way, you have an association to an earlier experience. Happens a lot with siblings. I was a younger sibling, had an older brother. He was a monster. He was 6'4", 240 pounds. He was 6 years older than me. Did I already say that? Okay. He was 6 years older than me. And so I developed a lot of little brother type behaviors from that age. Move forward, and you know, it's one thing when you're 60 pounds and you have a 240 pounder that is tormenting you. Now you move forward in life and suddenly you're 250 pounds and he's 220 pounds. But because of the earlier responses, the brain still keeps you in that position of being the younger brother and unable to respond. You've experienced the same thing being a middle and having two older brothers.
Yeah.
So our brain is really good at pattern recognition, saying, ooh, we've been here before, no need to conserve energy thinking logically through this, here's how we respond, and sometimes we're responding in unhealthy ways. Okay, so let's apply this then to the schoolroom. Well, let me go back. So what we do like in counseling would be, we begin talking about, okay, when so-and-so said, you know, maybe you could work a little harder at this, and you responded in a way that put them on the defensive. Let's talk about that. Why did you feel this way? And when was the first time you remember feeling that way? And maybe then you go back to that memory when you were corrected in front of the classroom or whatever. And all of a sudden, your brain is able to logically start thinking through the process. And so you go back and try to work out where the brain developed this association to correction that became negative. And then you begin thinking of it as, well, correction actually helps me to improve. And when I improve, I'm a healthier person. And so now I want correction. Correction is a good thing, not something to be avoided. Okay, so now let's transfer into the schoolroom. With our students, especially if your student comes from a public school situation or a private school situation where, okay, so what does that look like? Well, the first thing we have to do is look at the teacher. You lead, you create the atmosphere. So in that, you get what you lead. So we have to look at that and say, when it comes to schooling, and I did this a lot, I probably still do, I did not enjoy school at all. I love to learn, but we homeschool, we didn't home learn. So I would set the tone that we get through school. Learning is fun, but that's something different. That's what we do when we go on vacation or we go to music camp. That's not what we do when we sit down in the schoolroom, we're not learning. And so sometimes the association that I would bring to it would be frustration, anxiety. We had a lot of babies, so there were a lot of sleepless nights. So there would be just being cranky. Get to the schoolroom, get your work done, let's go. I would be impatient if they were struggling with a subject and I had to stop what I was doing to sit down and try to coach them through, say, long division or to score their work. I hate scoring work. So
I don't know of anyone who likes scoring work.
No, I don't. So I would bring that energy forward into the situation and create anxiety and tension in the learning process. Can you relate?
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing I have to do is in a classroom, I have to look and say, okay, am I bringing in to this classroom anxiety and tension and negative feelings? Am I bringing in any kind of angst into the classroom that my students may be responding to? Because we have these beautiful things called mirror neurons, which means we're always scanning the environment, looking for how people are behaving and responding. If there's fear, we feel fear. If there's anger, we feel anger. Have you ever caught yourself looking at a picture and saw somebody smiling and noticed you were smiling? It's a conditioned response. When somebody smiles, I smile. And so when I come into the classroom, do I bring that with me so that I give my students at least that advantage? Then I have to look at the student and I say, okay, what are some underlying things? Are there any previous mind's drawing blank. Any previous things that happened that may cause an association, so when we come into the classroom and we sit down, we begin to feel that right? So maybe they came into my classroom and I was frustrated and tense. Maybe I got upset with them and over-responded because they weren't getting their math, or maybe they weren't in the right level, whatever. Is there anything that might be causing an association? So when they sit down and they go to do their work, they're associating that to a negative response. Then I have to growth hack a little bit, and I have to think through this process. It's easy to go through the motions and say, just do the work, but I have to actually start thinking through. Part of like deschooling is stepping back a little bit and enjoying the response of being together as a family, enjoying the learning process, maybe looking for curriculums that they can have a say in, making things a little bit more friendly for them, and trying to build some new associations with learning. Sometimes it's important to talk about it and say, you know what, when the emotion you're going through right now is understandable because you struggled with math and you felt embarrassed because the other kids were getting it and you weren't getting it. But that doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing in math. That just means that you were struggling at that time, and so help them process the emotions they have as well. I think another thing that's really important is rewards, that we reward the behavior we want, and sometimes it's so easy as a parent. Rewards just take time. It takes time to be a good parent, and it's so much easier to be responsive and to operate from that intuitive brain as a parent even than it is to go into a thinking brain and say, what's really happening here? Why are they frustrated? Why are they fighting me? Why are they kicking back? Sometimes I think we have to be careful not to assume that every time our students kick back, it's behavioral. Sometimes the brain's way of responding to things is through anger or shutting down or any number of things, crying or being emotional. The brain gets frustrated. The brain will look for smaller problems to solve sometimes, or sometimes just, being naughty will create a diversion, so everything kind of slows down and comes back under control. We have to be careful that we don't just assume this is a moment where you could do this, you're choosing not to do this, and because of that now I'm going to discipline, because we want to be careful that we don't create a negative association. It's not to say that at times students aren't just being rebellious, defiant, or lazy, right? And I think we have to pray for discernment in that case, but we want to be careful not to just respond with the mentality, maybe you've heard this, no, I'm the boss, I told you what to do, and you're going to do it because I said to do it, and you don't challenge me. You don't control this situation because I'm in control of this situation. That sometimes can tap into my insecurities that I'm responding to because I feel out of control because I told the student to do something and they're not doing it. And so we have this dance, if you will, of emotions that are happening. So being able to step back and saying, how can we realize what's happening here. Is there anything that could be happening that maybe when we sit down to do math and they're frustrated, they're going back to an earlier association and the negative response they're having, and because of that they're in a bad brain spot, so that even being in a creative thinking brain, it's pretty much that part is shut down. I think one of the reasons that we have seen families have success with like math lessons for a living education is they'll go back a grade or two, and yeah, it's below the level that they would normally be in. The goal is to create a pleasant learning experience. So when the student sits down, it's like, well, I can do this. I can do addition. 2 + 2 = 4. And they do a page. And then the parent's like, yeah, way to go. You did it. Okay, so now we've got a student accomplish something that they could do. They got a reward for it so that there's a positive reinforcement. Maybe they all of a sudden said, man, I can do math. Yeah, you can do math. You're a math brain. Here's something interesting. I just saw a study where they conditioned people. So what they would do is they had Asian women. And Asian people are supposedly good at math. So what they would do is ask questions about, are you good at math? Just plain math. Then they would ask questions about being a woman. Well, women aren't supposed to be as good at math. So the people who were asked questions about being a good or just being a woman, who were in that association, did poorer on the test than just math people. But then they asked them questions about being Asian. And because the conditioned response is, I'm Asian, so I'm good at math, the Asian people that were asked questions about Asians did better than both groups.
That's crazy.
Just because they were in the brain of they're Asian and Asians do better at math. But they didn't tell them like you're Asian and Asians do better at math. It was just the association is, you know, okay, I'm a woman, so I'm not good at math. I have no opinion, just I'm good or not good at math, or I'm Asian, so I'm good at math. So just having that kind of response, you could affect somebody's test scores.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
So these associations that we have, we don't often realize it. When you're in marketing, we deal with associations all the time. We want rewards, we want good associations, we want, you know, sometimes we're watching TV and they'll put up some stupid thing in a commercial to get your attention. But what they've done is created a bad association. And so now you look at this product as poor in customer service that only people with mental issues would buy. And so you're there, it's almost counterintuitive. Yeah, you got my attention, but now I feel yucky about your product. Have you ever had that where you just feel yucky about something? It's a balance we have in the Facebook group. I'll tell you the truth. We want a Facebook group that runs well. We want to encourage people. We don't mind constructive feedback, but sometimes when things start to go off the rails, we have to bring it back. And we do it for a lot of reasons. We've explained it before. I'll probably do it again. But the balance is we end up losing a little goodwill each time that happens because people don't necessarily always respond as well to that aspect. And it's a challenge. But so it's always working to keep goodwill moving forward and good associations. And a lot of that sometimes is when a response happens, saying, well, this is why we do what we do, and it's to help the group stay on track. This is why we invest the thousands of dollars we do, to move us out of that intuitive brain, or out of that, the intuitive emotional brain of I don't like being corrected, to a thinking brain that says, oh, that makes sense. And so we want to do that with our students. We want to help them stay in a good brain spot where they're in a thinking brain as opposed to just reacting or associating with something that they've had negatively. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and I'll let Brittany, if there's questions or comments, feel free to post. Again, we're giving 2,500 reward points in the app and 2,500 reward points on the Facebook Live, which is $25 of spending power. So be sure to let us know you're here, what you think, questions, etc.
Yep. Vicky said, my daughter has a real problem with cursive writing in her private school. Now she has issue with all writing and yells and screams about them, even though I don't ask for cursive. Would love any advice.
Yeah, so right there, you part of it is understanding, okay, that response typically, like for me, my feeling is anger tends to mask a more sensitive emotion, right? When let's say in a relationship, when somebody doesn't do something and it makes you angry, typically that anger is a protective emotion, because really what we feel is rejection, or we feel fear, or we feel unloved. And so that anger is a protective emotion that helps us from being more vulnerable. So sometimes when a child acts in anger, they're protecting the more sensitive. Is it fear? Is it fear of failure? Because there was a struggle and there was a lot put on that, and maybe the child wasn't even ready for that cursive writing. Maybe the motor skills weren't ready, like we've talked about in the past. And especially in early childhood development, this is so important. So my encouragement with something like that would be, go back to something basic. You know, maybe even do something like just drawing a circle, or learning to draw some pictures or something like that, where you can say, wow, I think you have a gift, like you're doing really well here. Like that's pretty amazing. Or just if you notice that they wrote their name, hey, you did a good job writing your name, and look for little places where you can give a reward that helps begin to create new associations with writing. And understand, sometimes it's good to even ask them, why are you frustrated? What's happening here? And try to help them realize that, and then help them walk forward to saying, you know, it's okay that you weren't good at writing. I'm not good at writing. I'm an absolutely brilliant person. And I tell people, like, I used to have to stand in front of a church, and I like tables and illustrations. And so I would have a whiteboard and I would write out my message stuff on it, and routinely people would pick on me because of how terrible my writing was. But that's just part of who I am. So
It's part of his brand.
it is.
Jess said, all this makes perfect sense. My middle child is in kinder. We withdrew him from public school 2 months ago. Macy loves pig math, but when it comes to writing, she gets so frustrated. She thinks her writing has to be perfect and then just gets mad and wants to quit. So it makes sense that she's associating negative feelings from what happened in public school.
Yeah, this is what I love about that room for growth motto, is that we move forward with room for growth. I'm not perfect. My writing could use some improvement. There's room for growth. It's okay. My writing actually doesn't have to be perfect. It's not part of my identity. My handwriting has never been part of my identity. You had good handwriting. It is part of your identity. I had to find other things to have identity with. But I think giving children room to make mistakes. In fact, we've talked in the past about actually making one mistake unintentional. Do something where you know you're going to make a mistake. Try to do an algebra problem where you know you're not going to do it. There you go. You made a mistake. Now you can move forward and do good.
This ties in a little bit to Harley's comment. She said, my issue right now, my son loved math, flew right through level K. We started level 1, and we've hit place value village, and he shuts down and doesn't want to try. He automatically has a mindset of, this is hard, I don't want to do it. Any suggestions on what to try to do to help him love math again? I think, we don't always celebrate failure. And I think that ties in a little bit to it, is that, especially for people who are very perfectionistic, so I was good at handwriting growing up, and I would always get praised for if I wrote well. Well, nobody's gonna get praised if you don't write well, or if I did something where I just didn't care and wrote through it, I wasn't gonna get the praise from that. There are situations where we just don't celebrate failure, which, I mean, nobody's striving to fail, but we don't celebrate times when we put ourselves out there to fail and it happens.
Yeah. Well, the law of numbers, right? The law of numbers is you're going to have failure. I'm going to have success in life, and I'm going to have failure in life. And we need to know that. We don't have success from everything we do. In fact, if that's our mentality, it's going to be very it's very disappointing to go through life like that.
April asks, when you are the one who has created the bad response from your child, how do you fix it?
Yeah, well, number one is you get what you lead. Children are kind of resilient. When we change, they follow us. You get what you lead, right? And so if you lead change, they'll change with you. So, and don't be afraid to tell them, you know what, I've been stressed, I've come into the schoolroom, I brought tension, I've overreacted to things. And then I wanted you to be perfect, and that wasn't fair. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna give room for growth. I'm gonna try real hard to do better at creating a positive atmosphere here, and I'm gonna ask that you also try to have a good attitude and that we work together as a team, because learning is a team sport. We're not fighting in this. I'm not against you when I'm teaching you math. I'm here to help you. I'm on your team, and the goal is that you can be successful in life and successful beyond. So let's begin moving this forward. And don't get offended if they don't believe you, right? I mean, sometimes the proof is in the pudding, and you may fail, and then just say, you know what, that was a bad response, and I need to work harder again to try to create the positive experience here.
Right. Carrie said, my daughter despises reading. She started in public school and was pushed too hard and fell very far behind. How do I get her to love reading again?
Yeah, again, I think you got to go to the wins, the successful things. You know, maybe even just finding and doing, we used to do the read alouds as a family. And then every now and then, Mom would pass the book, so you guys would read a chapter. And then kind of just slowly build into, reading is awesome because we're learning new things and there's such power in it. Right. But don't make it about reading. Make it more about like discovery and stuff like that. I'm sure there's far more scientific answers than that somebody could provide. But that's my first thought.
Any advice on dealing with a child who is a perfectionist? We only ever expect effort and to try our best, but one child has internal perfectionistic tendencies.
Yeah, that's tough, isn't it?
It is really tough.
I don't really know how to answer because I'm not a perfectionist. So how would you answer?
Just knowing that it's okay to be messy, it's okay to make mistakes. I think for me, more as an adult, finding things that I didn't have to prove myself on, so that I could be in my bedroom and find something that I could just make all the mistakes I wanted to on because it was mine. I didn't have the pressure of trying to impress anybody or do anything for anybody. I could just do it on my own, and it was like my own outlet. And I think just finding things that they're able to have as their own, that the rules are, it's okay to be a mess, it's okay to make mistakes with, and that kind of slowly helped me be okay with making mistakes even in front of people.
I think we also pushed you a little bit into places where you weren't going to be safe.
Oh yeah, I went to this camp one time, and instead of putting me in, I played drums growing up, and so instead of putting me in the beginner class, he put me in the advanced class, which was terrifying, and it was all guys that were there that were like so much better.
Really good, yeah.
So I knew that I wasn't going to be the best in that situation, but I pushed myself in any way that I could. And it helped me because I pushed myself a lot harder than the people in the advanced class did. Like I got up in front of them and played even though like nobody was volunteering. So little things like that where yeah, you were intentional about putting me in places where it was going to push me to grow. It was going to be uncomfortable, but even now I think I've learned from that, and in uncomfortable situations now I do push myself in the same kind of way.
I think it's important for us as parents to be healthy in this too, right? Perfectionism is this thing that we chase, and we tie a lot of our identity into that, and I think we have to have a realistic expectation that there is no perfection. Nobody's perfect all the time, and there's we have to just teach our kids at the same level. You're going to be good in some things, and then other things not as much.
My mom said, I know each child is different and they respond different to reward systems. My question is, how do I distinguish what is the right reward for each child?
Growth hack. You don't know, so you test it. If something works, then you know to do it a little bit more. if it doesn't work, then stop doing it. And don't assume that because something works for you, it works for your student. It's taken me a long time in marriage to realize that Kristen is a lot different than me, and that what makes me happy and excited doesn't make her happy and excited. And so I'm trying really hard to become a student of her and be patient with the fact that this is a learning process. And I'm not trying to manipulate, I'm trying to understand how to be in a relationship where I bring value to the relationship because I understand her, not I want her to respond to what I want her to respond to. And I think it's the same with our kids. Each one is an individual, and the challenges that they're going to give us are different. And so we want to look for those type of, test it and see if it works.
Well, I think it was cool. Well, you kind of later on, as we were getting older, kind of really made a point to have relationships with us each individually, not just as a, we tend to, in big families, you have the older girls and the little boys, and you section the family off like that, and everybody's just kind of thrown in their little chunk, or you've got the middle kids, the younger kids, the older kids, and you guys really made a point to have relationships with us individually and learn our needs and wants and help coach us through life individually, and I think that helps tremendously too.
Yeah, I think that's the strength of moms too, is that she hasn't treated everybody equally. She's treated you individually. That was profound, wasn't that? That was good. I like that one.
High five.
That one was good. So when your kids are like, that isn't fair, say, no, we don't treat you equally. We treat you individually. That sounds good. That's logic. Yeah.
That is good.
I think too, as parents, it's easy to fall into that intuitive mind where we're just going through the motions. And every now and then, as a parent, we need resets where we step back and say, what am I doing here? Am I helping the situation or hurting the situation? Because and with each individual child, that happens, because all of a sudden things start to go off the rails, and 9 times out of 10, it's because I went into brain dead mode and wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. One final thing on that one, because I know this has been a long answer, but recently diving into our identities in Christ and a little bit of my study in that, I know I shared with you some about the Enneagram and understanding that we all have different core fears and core desires. And so for me, being a number 1, my core fear is of being corrupt or evil. And so that plays into all my perfectionistic tendencies. And so the gospel message that would relate more for ones is that God is the only one capable of being perfect, therefore I don't have to be. And so when your identity lies in that, as a 1, it's easier for me to be messy and let myself, give myself room for growth, because I'm not placing those expectations on myself to be perfect, because I know that God is the only one that is perfect through us. So
Yeah.
The Enneagram is really cool for that, and figuring out the different gospel messages and core longings and desires for each of those numbers.
Yeah, I like DISC, the DISC profiles, and the Briggs-Meyer, and I don't think that they're law, but what I do love is that we learn that we're different, and that what motivates you is different than what motivates me.
Yeah, and then realizing you can read as far into that as you want, but it'll give how ones, and I think you're a 5 or 6, how we would work best with each other, and you see the weaknesses and strengths of each of those. So you may be a mom and you may be a 1 clashing with your number 3 child, and so you can kind of see get ideas for the weaknesses and strengths in that relationship. Because
we impose our thoughts and fears and values onto other people. Yep.
Nicole said, I'm also struggling with getting my first grader 7-year-old to write. She doesn't want to trace anything and feels like it's too hard. Do I need to make her trace everything in every subject?
I don't think you do. I think we've talked about it in the past. If you're pushing real hard in the early years, you'll fight that all the way through. And so I think it's important that you you start small, right? So test it. Let's just do tracing for one day. Why are we doing tracing? Let her know we're not just tracing because the page says to trace. It's actually growing your skills. So it takes a lot of work to take your hand and put it to a pen, hold the pen, and then draw a line and keep it steady to go on that line. That's a lot of work. And so part of her response could just be to the fact that her brain is working really hard. And so do a small one. Let there be a win. Woo. And don't push too hard on it.
Some feedback from Gloria. She said, that's something I have failed in tremendously in the past, but has changed this year. This is our first year with Master Books, and I believe it has helped us have a better school year. My oldest is finally succeeding in writing and doing it without complaining or with tears.
Yay. Yes, game changer. Hashtag game changer.
Rachel said, I have a 10-year-old who gets immediately defensive with any correction. He frequently will lash back with things like, well, you don't. This is helpful, helping me to understand his protective emotion. I'm going to really attempt to look deeper into the root.
Yeah, two things. Do you do that? Do you or your husband or spouse do that? Do you respond to any negative correction? Like, does it prick your ego and bang, so it's a learned response? Or is there some place where that's been learned because it affected their pride, ego, and made them look small?
Chrissy said, a saying I've held on to is, what is fair isn't always equal, and what is equal isn't always fair.
True.
One more. Sarah said, how is Kristen? I hope she can join some of the live chats again soon.
She's doing good. She's still going through chemo treatments, but the last mammogram, there was no indication of cancer, which is awesome. And I believe, she's still working and helping in the Moms of Master Books group. She's still working on developing curriculum. She works an insane amount of hours. Her and I are planning to go out for a night and do a language lessons for a living education remotely. So yeah, she'll be live with me soon. Yeah.
Carrie said, my stepdaughter did that test with me. She said I'm a 9. LOL. Her exact words were, oh yeah, you're totally a 9. Let's see. Irina said, I was growing up as an only child, but now having many kids and observing their interactions and sibling rivalry, I still have so much to learn. Listening to how other families and their own experiences in large family is helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's a totally different, because siblings add a whole different feel and everything to the family.
And create associations. You know it. There are just certain things that happen.
I'm finding that most all of my triggers are from siblings and things, where my placement in the family and things that happened just growing up. And even though things have been resolved and it's obviously not the same, I always end up triggering back to between like being 12 and like 17 years old where things happened, and that's where I go. So
yeah, and I'll often say that's an interesting response. Why do you feel that way?
And then so we'll dive deep into it. I'll be like, well actually, and then I start crying. I'm like, because this happened and now I feel it here, and then I just become a mess.
But it does help once you're able to identify the root place where that association began. Now you can look back and say, wait a minute,
right.
I'm 22, I'm no longer in a place where that's even true.
Yeah.
And that was silly, like they didn't know what they were doing then, they were children.
Right.
And then other times, it's harder.
Yeah, we had this conversation a little while back, it's so weird how so many times our triggers just go back to your teenage years.
Or even younger.
Yeah.
Early childhood, yeah.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to end with is Romans 12, to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think that such an important concept that Scripture actually tells us to think on things that are lovely and true and pure and beautiful, and not to be conformed to the things of this world. And I think part of that is when we focus on those things, it helps create the associations. Like God knows, hey, when you think on things that are lovely and true and pure, the associations that you're creating with those things are so much better. And can I say, one of the best things for us to do as adults, it's harder sometimes to get our children to do it, gratitude. Gratitude and thankfulness is one of those things that forces the brain out of intuitive mode and into the deliberative thinking mode. It says, okay, I've got to think through this situation, and even though I'm annoyed because this happened, I can be thankful, right? I'm annoyed this happened at my job and by the people that are part of that. Okay, but I'm thankful that I have a job, and I'm thankful that I was able to work and I'm physically able. And all of a sudden it moves my brain, because my brain starts looking for other options and opportunities and other associations. I think that's why developing, what do they say, an attitude of gratitude is so important, because it actually shifts us out of that negative, emotional brain, responsive brain, into the thinking brain. And I would really encourage you to start there with the classroom. Hey, today is a good day, because today we have the opportunity to learn. We're healthy, we have a classroom or whatever, we have books, we have master books. That's something to celebrate and be thankful for. Just so many things that we can be thankful for. And so now we're going to learn. And then trying to look for some of these things.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, hopefully this has been a blessing to you. I always end saying that way. But I do hope that it's been a blessing, and that these teaching tips provide some insight. We always say the Holy Spirit trumps everything we say. These are insights and tips. If we were having a conversation, this is what I would say. It's absolutely not the law, and it doesn't represent the views and opinions of Master Books.
A lot of times it does stem from conversations that we have throughout the week.
Yes.
We're like, oh, this is interesting. We should share it and get everybody else's thoughts on it.
Yes. So, and we know from past mistakes, I think of my early kids. I was like a bull in a china shop. And now I'm probably too much like a dove in a china shop. Or a worm. I don't know. Not worm. That's a bad association there. I need to figure that one out. All right. I got to go do some psych work. Hey, guys, have a good weekend. God bless you.
Bye.